This is the How to MSP podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Moore.
Giving yourself the grace to let things change as you get more data. I think people, they tend to try to be perfectionist, or they think if they do something, that's got to be a big win right off the bat. But I think, again, if you give yourself the grace to miss, I think that can be really fruitful for your business.
All right. Welcome to the How to MSP podcast. I am your host, Andrew Moore with Ridgeview Advisors. And today I'm very excited to have a friend of mine from the channel. We have partied together. We have hung out at conferences together. We have talked about the channel together. This is Larry Garcia, formerly with BrightGauge, but now with Strety. He is a founding member of the organization and president. And I am super excited that he's here with us on the podcast today. Hello, Larry.
Andrew, how you doing? Great to be here.
It's awesome to have you here, sir. So physically, where does the podcast find you today? Where are you located, sir?
I'm in Arlington, Virginia, so I'm just across the river from DC. So it's a real quiet time of last 8 years here. I should just moved here 4 years ago, so moved in 2021, but in Arlington, Virginia, but I hail from Miami, Florida.
Right on. Did you guys get hit with all the snowmageddon stuff too, or is that you too far south for that?
No, we did. It was wild. It was this mixture of 4 or 5 inches of snow, but then it was like another 5 inches of sleet. So it made what they, snowcrete is what they called it. So like the plows were getting stuck. I actually saw a plow slide down a hill, and it was a wild week and a half, essentially.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, I hope, you seem like you're
all
worse for wear.
All set now. Yeah. Everything melted finally, but it was a weird 10 days, it's like the salt could hardly melt anything. And it was crazy here for sure.
Living in Texas, it's not really something that we got some ice, and then I got stuck. Like I'm in my new house in Austin, and I'm not used to it because I'm from Houston where it's all flat. And so when it got ice in my driveway is got a pretty good angle on it. And so I was like, yeah, I'm just going to put my truck in 4 low and I'm gonna get out of here. Yeah, no, that did not happen. And my truck was like, no, we're not going up this hill. And so I was just like, well, I'm just going to be stuck here for a couple of days. So lesson learned. So why don't you tell everybody about your background, a little bit about what you've done in the space, why people should listen to you, like where's your experience at, kind of what your background is it in our fair channel here, sir?
Yeah, like the sort of TLDR for me was, out of college in the finance world. I had a stint actually being a public school middle school teacher, which is a whole another great story, but I almost went back into finance. But at the last second, my now co-founder, Brian, he had just started BrightGauge in 2012 or 2011, really. In 2012, they were growing a little bit. And he's like, look, I'd love for you to join me. And, I had asked him about tech advice because he had previously worked at IBM. Then he was working in his family's MSP. And I said, I'm interested in tech. I might go back to Deutsche Bank. And he's like, hey, let's have a conversation. And he's like, look, I started this startup. I can pay you a teacher's salary, which was $38,000 in Miami, Florida. And I was like, okay. And he's like, I don't know if this is going to work out, but it would be a lot of fun working together. And you have sales experience from your finance days. And so I was like, yeah, what the hell? Like I'm making a salary now, no inflation, right? It wasn't like I was in debt or anything. And so I took a shot, and I was interested because it was, back then, no one says the word big data anymore, but back then that was like the hot thing, right? Like whatever AI was, and now whatever crypto was 3 years ago, big data was like that 2010s, 2011, like everyone was saying it. No one knew what it was. And BrightGauge was sort of in that space. So I was like, worst case scenario, I learned something interesting for a year. And so joined, and man, we really grinded it out, ended up surviving. We went from, losing 23 customers a month and gaining 20, where that math doesn't make sense, to, growing to 4,000 plus customers. So, and a successful exit. So yeah, it was a great journey. And then during that journey, we had someone give us the Traction book, which quite a bit of, MSP owners have either read it or they've got it behind them in their bookshelf, because that book is a pretty popular thing to see at a lot of MSP owners' house. I remember, chatting with them in the BrightGauge days, or even the Strety now. They're like, "Yeah, I have the book. I've never read it." Someone gave it to me 5 years ago, a friend, a colleague, somebody at the Chamber of Commerce, etc. And so we started doing it at BrightGauge. It was pretty transformational. We did what would be called self-implementing, which is we read the book and we just said, "All right, let's just do this." And it went really well. It was a really solid structure for us. And then yeah, we were like, "Man, we need a tool for this." And back then, there was no real software. So we just built it as an internal tool, right? We had some devs on it and built it as an internal tool. We gave it a project name and we ran our meetings, and everybody who remembers the Microsoft DOS terminal, that's what it looked like. It was pretty simple. It was like, you have an issue? If not, it just rolls over to the next meeting, but that was pretty much it. And then we ended up commercializing it, right? We had a lot of MSP owners that were using our competitors, and they were like, we think you can build something better. We've always enjoyed the BrightGauge experience. Like, can you bring that sort of user interface, that sort of that in your knowledge of, the data space? And so we commercialized it in earnest 3 years ago, just about. And then yeah, we grinding it out. We got a license from EOS worldwide, and we've been steadily growing in that space. And MSPs are our biggest vertical, but now we've got companies like Duracell or Equinix and stuff like that on the platform. So pretty excited journey here the past decade and a half.
That's awesome. And I do remember BrightGauge because I just remember at the time when we were very early on trying to figure out like where all of our stuff was, whether it was, I think originally I used it with ConnectWise, but then we tried to use some component of it. We used a graphic display system for Kaseya, and then we were trying to integrate, and it, it, it was really, really hard back then to take the data structure that you would get out of ConnectWise and get anything really meaningful out of it so that you could
Yeah.
display what was going on. So it was a lot of just hunting and pecking and using their reports to try to look at data kind of in the past. And
Yeah.
so the big data element of it, I remember because everything was, at that time we were moving to the cloud and data was becoming easier and easier to keep lots and lots and lots of. So I really, really liked what BrightGauge did in order to create that graphically. And I can see how now that you talk about the bridge, taking information that is disparate and mostly unactionable and turning it into something graphical and potentially forecastable and actionable was a very easy transition to get to where you guys are
Yeah.
today. Well, I oversimplify. You make it look easy, but to
Yeah.
get it into Strety and to make it look like something that people would understand, is that more or less kind of the thought process around creating something like Strety? Is it to take like information that's kind of unstructured and give it some sort of life for accountability, or where do you guys really kind of see what you bring to the market, and what does that look like for MSPs for your product?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's our algorithm is always to be on the cutting edge, but not the bleeding edge. Right.
Mhm.
So even in the MSP breakage days, like we were second or third or fourth to the market, but we were late enough that we could bet on cloud back then. Right. And so we ended up wiping out our competitors because of that. Because back then, I remember, I still remember this was 2013, beginning of 2013, and I had people was like, "I'm not moving my data to the cloud," which was like, "Oh, well, man, are you sure?" Like everybody, American Airlines is on the cloud, like, but
Yeah,
the and that stuff, and that's really helped us here too, right? So same thing, like you said, there's all these various tool sets, meetings, OKR/rocks, KPIs, all these things are all over the place. And if you can centralize them and relate them to each other, that's really been a huge success for us, both at BrightGauge, but here at Strity as well.
that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on today was because when I work with my one-on-one coaching companies, I often find that some of them are already using like 90, some of them are using Strety, some of them have got a spreadsheet that they use. And what I really find fascinating is even if they're able to start putting the information in one spot, a lot of the times they really lack the understanding. You talked about self-implementation of how to create any accountability out of that information. Um, and I feel like there's a real disconnect between we're using a tool and we're actually taking advantage of what the tool provides us in a way that we can impact our business. You brought up a good point. People are like, "Oh, I've got the book. I've just never read it." Where are you seeing people that are more successful with using Strety? Where are you seeing people that are actually transforming their businesses when it comes to accountability? How do you coach them through that with your user groups? Like, what does that look like in your world, like with your product?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like we always tell people like, the first thing you got to do is go get it, make it raw, right? Like go try something and go get a bunch of no's or reds or missed rocks or missed goals. Like go get that. Like that the first goal should be to go miss, right? Like, but to just get and start doing something, right? Because I think a lot of times the traction book sitting there is just like, yeah, I'll just continue doing what I'm doing now. It's worked for so long, right? What's interesting to me though is like it's like the same calorie burn, right? Like the chaos operating system in your head of running your business is almost burning the same amount of calories as like an accountable framework where you're like on task, you're reporting your numbers to someone, doing all that stuff. Cause you're still kind of thinking about it, like it's something good or bad, right? Like maybe you're not writing down the number and there's like a little bit of more effort spent on like finding the number and reporting it back, but it's not a lot more, right? Um, it's kind of like one of those crazy things where like someone is like a 5K runner, right? Like you're really just burning like 20, 30% more calories than if you just sat all day, right? So it's like not that much. So it's very same sort of analogy to business. You think it's like double the effort, but it's really like 15% more effort. So once we talk to people, we say, we kind of give them the story. We're like, look, just go get some numbers. Go pick two goals for this quarter. Like we'll get to the EOS 3 to 5 per person across the company. You'll get there in a year. But for this, like go protect two goals for this quarter and let's just try to hit one, right? Like, and you might whiff 3 weeks in, you might be like, this doesn't make sense. I mean, I'll frankly, I just came off of an annual meeting where I had this goal for the quarter. And I was like, all right, I've got, Larry's got his 3 goals. 3 weeks in, two have already dropped. I'm like, I'm not going to hit this goal. And I just got some data back from the market where I'm like, but this one goal is super important. Like it's more important than I thought it was. And so I've been ultra focused on that goal. That one's super healthy. I'm definitely going to hit it by this quarter end. And again, I dropped 66% of my goals and things, giving yourself the grace to let things change as you get more data. I think people, they tend to try to be perfectionist or they think if they do something that's going to be a big win right off the bat. But I think again, if you give yourself the grace to miss, I think that could be really fruitful for your business.
I agree with that. I had a conversation with a couple of my clients over the last few months, and specifically with their service delivery team. And one of them said, that data looks really, really bad. And I was like, that's great. Cause that means you have a place to improve. like,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah, like your SLAs are trash. Let's fix that. Right.
yeah,
Like if you wait to report on everything until it's green, then there's no, in my opinion, I don't think there's a reason that you need to report on it because it's green. Like if you're waiting to fix everything before you start looking at it, and how are you going to know where you can make improvements? I don't like that at
exactly,
all.
exactly.
And one of the things that I find too is when people really get into EOS and they start with the executive leadership group, I have found sometimes and that there's a lot that goes into as they begin to work through that process, like right seats, right
Yeah,
people. Is there anything to people, I guess, being hesitant to start that process because they're afraid that if they start looking under those rocks, and no pun intended towards the actual rock, but if they start
yeah,
looking in places where they're just like, I think there's some smoke over there, and there's this person that's on my leadership group or in a lead position, and I'm just worried that I may have to make a change there. Do you have any sort of philosophy around that? Like where do you start to look when it comes to how to assemble that group? And if they know that there may be some issues, like pulling off band-aids, what does that look like when y'all talk to people, or what experience have you had in your own businesses where you've had to deal with that?
yeah. I mean that's tough. I mean we've had to part ways with employees in the BrightGauge days, and there were some people that were super early on, and what's funny is things change and evolve, right? Like what they fit perfectly 2 years prior right? Like didn't exist anymore. That world didn't exist and they just weren't a fit anymore, right? As the way the company has evolved, because that's the company itself is an organism. So I think one thing that's interesting is like if you start asking yourself the question, all right, there's kind of a smoke and that someone's kind of like always negative and they don't fit the core values of the company and all this stuff. But they've been on for for lack of a better term, or what they call ride or die, right? Like they were early with you, they were great, they were hustlers, they kind of got you to where you were, and you've got a big sense of loyalty, right? If you ask yourself the question, hey, if I go into the future and they're at a company where they're super happy, they're super aligned with that values of that company, right? Like, why would you stop them, right? If they came to you and said, hey, I found another company where all that stuff. So I think in one sense is have the conversation, but work with them. Work with them on like, hey, like this is what we need. This is what you need. It kind of doesn't mesh right now, but let's have a conversation. And maybe we can't get there, but like doesn't mean you have to fire someone in the first conversation. But you can say, hey, let's work towards something. And it becomes very evident. Some people are a little bit more aggressive. Some people are like, hey, this is wrong person, wrong seat. Let them go, free them, all that stuff. Me, it's like just be open and honest, right? Just be open and honest of what we need. Be open and honest about what they need. Where does it fit? Can changes be made either at the organizational level or at the personal level? And if it fits, let's build a roadmap. Like, what does that look like? Maybe they become a consultant, right? Like maybe they're not on the books as a W-2, but like they serve some function that they really appreciate of their job. They just don't like the new thing. And maybe they're just a contractor for a while they figure out that next, journey. So that's something that we said, hey, just start having the conversations, identify it, have the conversations. And there's multiple ways to get to that same door, right? It's the more aggressive way and then the more thought out, time and being patient way.
I think one of the areas that I see happen when it comes to right seat, right person, well, two different things. One is I feel like a lot of the times owners in various businesses, whether it's an MSP or not, or people in leadership positions assume that everyone at or above their level at the leadership level has the same toolbox, right? They have the same abilities to do things where they figure things out quickly and they're self-motivated and they don't need a roadmap and new and interesting ideas don't scare them. And they're just like, I don't understand why this is hard. Why is this person not being successful? And, and I think it takes a lot of scar tissue as a leader to realize everybody, when you say it out loud, people are like, well, yeah, that sounds stupid, Captain Obvious, but like everybody's different, right? Everybody's got
Yeah.
different skills and inventory. So how do you recommend organizations using these frameworks start to have those conversations? You said, hey, you need to start creating roadmaps, talk to them about stuff. What does it actually look like when you say that? Like, how do you start the process of saying, here's what your job role is, and this is what we need out of you? And, where do you start? Do you start with the job description? Do you start with, daily tasks? Do you start with KPIs or OKRs? Like, where do you start when it comes to having those conversations with people so you can show them a baseline of what good looks like and help them to understand what fit and function is in a role?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we definitely leverage the accountability chart in our thing, which is, the way of doing the org chart where you kind of do it by the roles and not by the person, right? The traditional org chart is here's a person who reports to them and cascading down, right, to the mail clerk at the bottom, right? In the accountability chart, you just say, all right, what are the roles that help this company function, right? And I think you build that out first without even reference to the person. You say, all right, in this role, what do they need to do? And it is that what does it need to do? Is it job description? What are the deliverables of the KPI for that role? Like, hey, in this role, a sales development rep, like, what do we need? We need 80 dials. We need, 20 conversations. We need 2 meetings booked, right? And so there might be some KPIs there, right? Job description is you show up, you have a positive attitude, you make the dials, right? That there's some will, skill you can teach. So we might put that in the description, and then we say, hey, will you fit? And we do a pretty good job too in hiring of using that as well. So that's a little bit comprehensive to do, but it's helpful both to having current conversations with people in the right seat that've been around a long time. It's also helpful for recruiting, right? Of really aligning of what our expectation is. But yeah, we'll do the whole holistic thing. What are our KPI deliverables? What are the daily tasks? What's the description? And what type of person are we looking for this role?
And as you go through that process, I have a hard time, just me personally. So I'd love for you to dig into this just a little bit. Talk about the accountability chart. I honestly get really kind of frustrated and confused about accountability versus org chart. And I'm just like, like, can you educate me? Talk to me a little bit about the difference between accountability and org chart and why you prefer accountability and where org chart works better. Like, give us a rundown on this because I've tried to explain it to my clients in the past, and I finally, honestly, I just give up and I'm like, org chart, just use an org chart. What's your thought on that? How does that work?
Well, at some point, you probably need to definitely have an EOS implementer in here for sure that would give you a real great answer to this. But it starts at the top where you say every company has a visionary and an integrator, right? There's someone who is at the top of the crow's nest, is like, hey, this is where we're going, right? But then someone's got to make the trains run on time, and that's the COO role that Andrew you're very familiar with, right? So
Mm.
who's going to make the trains run on time, who's going to make sure operations are running well, and that's that they call the integrator, right? They kind of have their hands in a lot of different places, and definitely at the leadership level, and they're leading, they're managing, they're seeing if people are accountable, which is, are you going to do what you're going to do, right? And what you do is after those people, then you're structuring functions, right? Like, who's the sales leader, who's the marketing leader, who's the technology leader, who is the CFO, right? Who's doing the finances, and multiple people can sit, and not multiple people can sit in each individual seat, and you can be in multiple seats. So, for example, you know, I right now am in transitioning from integrator to the visionary role, right? It's just that season of Strety it makes more sense for me to be in that role, and my co-founder and I are swapping, right? But I also lead marketing, and he leads the CFO function, right? So he handles finances, and I handle sort of the marketing seat. And so your face could be on kind of all these multiple things in here. And it is like who reports to who, but as a function, as of, if you imagine that this company was just on Sims and it wasn't people, it was just, some, mechanical thing like this reports to this, is how you would structure it. Like, and then you say, all right, fill the leaders. Now, another thing about the accountability chart, why it's interesting is you can fill it with contractors, right? You can fill it with contractors. You can fill it with consultants, right? You can fill it with, fractional bookkeeper, for example. And so that tends to be a little bit cleaner than the traditional org chart that has all the W-2s on there. And then on some box on the side says, hey, we pay for some third party services. Like, no, in this accountability chart, you say, hey, we've got a bookkeeper and they're accountable for keeping our books clean and, accounts receivable and accounts payable up to date.
That's super helpful. When you just mentioned getting an EOS implementer to go deep into some of this stuff. Um, why'd you guys land on EOS? Like, what other frameworks are out there? What do people need to focus on when it comes to accountability? I know you guys prefer EOS, you like EOS, you're accredited there, but are there other things that companies use to drive forward with accountability? And you know,
Yeah. Yeah, there's a good amount of them. A couple that come to mind are scaling up is one. There's a gentleman named Vern Harnish who he wrote the Rockefeller Habits, which is a great book, and I think he was actually the founder of EO, which is a pretty popular sort of peer group in the MSP space or SMBs at large in the US. So scaling up is one, Pinnacle is another one. Some people do RACI, some people do just OKRs, right? So it's the objectives and key results, and you manage the whole company off of OKR, essentially goals across the organization. So there's a couple of different ones, but it's kind of like some people do jazzercise, some people do CrossFit, some people do bar class, some people do just weight training, stuff like that. It's Yeah, the ultimate goal is just to be healthy, right? And then there's just a bunch of different ways to do it. And there's some clean overlap, right? There's nothing new under the sun. A lot of this stuff is about, having healthy meetings, having good goals, having a good vision for the company, and everything in the middle. So,
I found that EOS. I remember when I read Traction. So I've read, well, back in the day, I have probably read every business process book on the planet, and it felt like it felt like the founder of the guy who wrote Traction. he's like, I'm just going to pull from every single one of these different processes. And it's what, to your point, it's like, it wasn't anything new. And
Yeah.
whatever EOS had come out of felt like it came out of Rockefeller Habits and Good to Great and like all these other different books. So
Yeah.
to your point, it's almost like a new, it's like a new business religion that was compiled from all these other ideas of, where people go. And I think you and I were talking earlier where, you know, from my perspective, when I work with a client, I used to think it, I think it's Buddhism. They say that all attempts at enlightenment are heading towards the same goal, but I don't feel like that's the way it is when it comes to accountability. Just because you have a weekly meeting doesn't necessarily mean that that's moving in the right direction towards accountability. Like you're not heading towards nirvana. You actually might be moving in the wrong direction because you're not using a process or a tool. Can you just touch base a little bit on like where you've seen in your own work or where you're seeing your clients, why is having a process or a system, why is picking a religion and creating a dogma and using some sort of a tool in order to structure that, why is that so important to a small business? And why are people failing to actually do that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's like it's what you don't know is like the effect of one thing in the business affecting something else, right? The ripple effect across, right? Like, hey, this meeting goes poorly because there's a problem, right? But that problem could be solved by a really good 90-day goal, right? And that's kind of a different component, right? Outside the meeting. And so I think having that framework is what's super helpful because if not, you're just going to have the chaos operating system running the chaos operating meetings, the chaos operating goals, the chaos operating accountability chart, the chaos operating 10-year vision, right? The 10-year vision is kind of like do something, right? We're going to grow, right? We will be bigger than we were today. We'll be bigger 10 years from now. And it's easy, right? It's the default, it's the inertia. What this stuff does is it kind of makes you, like when someone goes to work out, like they go get a trainer, like if you can imagine, there's this study where it's like, hey, if someone gets a tutor, like they tend to outperform the mean, like some crazy number, right? The only problem is that you can't get a teacher for every single student in the US. But if you do, and that's a possibility of AI, and I'm sure we'll dive into AI here in a second, is the fact that, getting that framework is almost like that tutor, right? It's like, this is what you do here, then, right? And I remember I went to all boys Catholic school in Miami, and I had this priest who always be like, Larry, everybody wants the resurrection, but they don't want the crucifixion. And so that's the key thing of the framework. Putting the framework in is going to be different than what you're doing, right? But it's having that sort of sustained effort and following a recipe, right? Is always going to be better than not, right? Regardless if it's EOS, regardless if it's some other, framework, regardless if it's something that, Andrew, you just say, look, I've had experience and here's the 10 things you should do. Like if someone follows those 10 things, they're probably going to be a lot better than if they are kind of just haphazardly doing things.
Yeah, I found that a lot. I have a home gym. I'm really excited about. I was like, I can't wait to have this home gym when I moved into my new house. It was really hard to go in there. Like, like I wake up early, and I'm like, I'm gonna go get some coffee and I'm gonna go work out. But I know if I don't put out my clothes the night before and I'm not focused, or maybe I had a beer, like it's not something I do. And I think that comes back to anything worth doing. It's just the momentum of it and the process of starting something from scratch, especially starting something that you might suck at, right? Like you're not going to be great at building an accountability system the first couple of months.
Yeah.
It's just not. And I think the overwhelmingness of it, coming back to what we had talked about earlier, which is don't go in and try to eat the elephant whole, right? Start with one KPI, start measuring something, start with one rock per person that's achievable. When we talk to our clients about those sort of things, I feel like everybody gets lost in the sauce about, I'm going to try to implement this new system to run my business. And I guess it's just not that complicated, right? I mean, I know at some point, if you use it long enough, it gets fairly in depth, but I mean, people shouldn't make this into something it's not. You're just picking a path and choosing to make an effort and organize yourself in some way. And you don't have to make it up from scratch, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not magic. So from that perspective, where do you start to tell people like, hey, when you go in, like, do you do the whole VTO thing first? Like, what do you recommend to people who are just starting down this path? Like, where do y'all set the bar to start saying, look, when you get into the systems, just do the minimum, like 4 or 5 things. And then if you're doing that week over week, let's move on to the next thing. Like, what does that look like in your space with your clients? How do you guys handle that?
What's funny is my answers evolved, right? Because we self-implemented in the BrightGauge days. So from 2016 to 2020, when we're at the business, it was, reading the book and implementing it. And I would have answered this up until probably January. I would have said, the most important thing is just get the weekly meetings right. Like just run your weekly meetings, have a place to communicate, dump your issues throughout the week, right? Like the fires you have to fight that day, like you just fight them that day, but the fires that can wait a little bit or at least until the next weekly meeting, like that's going to give you some savings there. And that's what I would have told you before January. We finally decided, hey, you know what? Like it's really time for us to start using an implementer, like a third party who's kind of like spot checking us and teaching us, facilitating the annual meetings and all that stuff. And so we contracted with a lady by Lisa Gonzalez, and she actually wrote the process book for EOS Worldwide. And gosh, now I want to tell you is like really what you should do is the key stakeholders in the business should sit and say, all right, what do we want? Like, what do we want to do? Like, can we all agree? And I think what that does about starting sort of further out, as opposed to what I originally would tell you about the weekly meeting, is like it kind of helps everybody align to, okay, what are we going to do in 3 years? What are we going to do in a year? What are we going to do this month? Well, all right, how does it line up to 10 years? Does, we want to grow? Does cutting our SLA down this quarter align up with us growing? Probably. Like if our SLA is better, our customers are happier and they're probably referring us business. Let's do that, right? Hey, should we go start an AI consultancy? Maybe, maybe not. That has a little bit more risk. Like there isn't a straight path to growing the MSP business there. Maybe there is. Like you can have a debate around it, but always with that North Star. What do we want to be in 10 years? And so now I would tell you, yeah, I think starting with that, where do you want to be in 10 years? Chunking it down to 3 years and 1 year. What are the core values of this company? Like what type of person do you want to work with? What's important to them? Ours as Strety is we want humble people, we want passionate people, and we want good people, right? Hey, would I trust them? If a wallet got left behind, would I trust them? Are they good people at heart? Yeah. Are they humble, right? Like they work hard, but like it's not, oh, everybody loves me. I do everything perfect. Like, we don't want to work with people like that. It's just exhausting to us. Right. And are they passionate? And the passion thing is interesting. We always hired this and we had the same people or the same core values at BrightGauge, which was, are you passionate about something else, right? We always thought like if you're passionate about playing guitar, the railroad tracks are there to go be passionate about like providing good service, right? Like you know what it's like to put your head down and be a master of your craft because you played incredible guitar. You know that when you got to go serve a customer in customer success or sales, you've got those railroad tracks. You know what that looks like. So you've got that muscle memory. And so we wanted passionate people. They didn't have to necessarily be passionate about the MSP industry.
I love that you talked about getting everybody aligned at the leadership level. I've had a couple of coaching engagements and some things that have happened in my prior life with other MSPs where there was a conversation where there were two owners or partners in some way with the business. And when the conversation was, we want to grow, one of them wanted to grow into a more profitable lifestyle business and the other one wanted to grow into a platform based
Yeah.
MSP, right? Like, so sometimes these things happen where you realize if you don't look at the 5-year, 10-year plan, when you say we want to grow, everybody in the moment is like, well, hell yeah, we all want to grow.
Yeah.
But maybe we don't want to grow to make $20 million because that just seems hard and a lot of work.
Yeah.
Maybe we want to grow to do 3. And that uncovers a lot of dissonance between what's going on in the leadership group, which I think is really important because I believe that manifests itself in that the chaos meetings because people are at odds with what they corely want to see out of the business and what they want from themselves personally. And if that isn't aligned very early in the process, it doesn't matter how much agreement happens on what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. There's always going to be an underlying frustration about what the actual goal is to achieve what you're trying to get down on paper, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the ripple effect on hiring, do we hire that additional person? That's gonna hurt your profit margins. And so one person's gonna not want to hire someone. The other person is like, well, we kind of need that person. On mergers and acquisitions, like, hey, do we go hire, acquire a smaller competitor? If you're a platform play, yes. If you're a margin play, then the number's gonna be really tight, right? And maybe you can't acquire them. And so, yeah, that rippled down to a ton of decisions down the road if the two are aligned, right? If the company is not aligned.
So you brought up AI. I was watching CNBC a couple of days ago and the market was doing weird stuff. And I guess recently they've coined, not them, but the markets have coined SaaS apocalypse.
Yeah.
Oh, everything's changing. And everybody in the MSP space is scrambling to try to figure out what to do with AI within their own business, how to help their clients with it. What are you seeing with your business? What are you seeing when it comes to coaching and accountability? What are you seeing when it comes to how people are running their business when it comes to using AI? What does that look like for y'all? And, what advice do you have for the folks out in the channel about what to start thinking about?
Yeah, I think it's always wise to dedicate, 1, 2, 3% of your resources to learning about it. It's not gonna go away, right? And then it just depends on your philosophy of, do you think it's gonna end the world or not? Personally, I don't. Uh, I think it'll be a very useful tool. I think it'll be transformational, like the internet was transformational. But I'm less of like a doom and gloom person. Um, just because at the end of the day, it's like, I know I don't want another spam call. I already get those, right? Like, I'm already getting them. Like, is an AI claw bot dialing for someone and me getting 10x more spam calls going to make me buy something for someone? Like, no, like, kind of doesn't matter, right? And so, somewhere to definitely research, be interested in, do little experiments. There's a lot of great vendors in the space. Like, I know Thread is super into that AI, trying to resolve tickets and stuff like that. There's others. Pia is another one that's fantastic in that space. So I think it's something to research, be on top of. Definitely not be. I think it's. I don't know if I pronounce it right, but Luddite or whatever it is. Like, you don't like technology. I
The
forget the
Luddites,
pronunciation.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I definitely not be that. Obviously, like, you don't want to because your customers are going to ask you those questions. So be educated in it. Be using, the paid version, the $20 version of these things. Test things out. But I don't, I don't think if you think of like I heard this was like Salesforce.com, right? Like, people have a weird relationship with Salesforce.com. They're like, it's a CRM, it's expensive, all this stuff. That thing has had probably this year 130 or 40 bugs that have been reported and fixed, right? Can you imagine someone with a lovable account creating a Salesforce and then putting your customer data on it and be like, oh, it's been published to everybody, or, it's accessible. So there's a lot more to SaaS than just simple, making a wireframe and doing these things. If the eventuality, yes, there's a future that, someone can just say, hey, I want a fitness app and it's going to be created. Yeah, at the end of the day, like, I just think it's further out than we think.
Yeah, what I've been trying to figure out how to do personally is create a way that you can actually expand your knowledge within your organization so that other people can get very similar advice or information that they could get without bothering you, right? So like,
Yeah.
as an example, if there's some way of being able to go ask the Larry bot, like, tell me about this within Strety, it would be really great that it would use a source of information within the organization with files or whatever and just say, this is what our core values are and this is what we want you to do with it. And, here's how I would, you know, tell you to solve that problem. I think there's something there to taking, you talked about big data, certain levels of unstructured information, trying to create a way, in my opinion, that you can build better processes and explanation for how things work. Because I heard a guy I'm going to vamp for a second. So I heard a guy the other day on a podcast, and what he said was, he's an AI expert. And he said there was a path that people have taken for like 4,000 years on learning. And the learning is you go, you know very little about something and you work with a mentor, and that mentor helps you to understand it. You get better at it over time. Right. And what we've seen lately is if you take an intern, which is very much in that vein, and you put them at a company, well, what they're going to be doing is using AI to help them with what they're up to, even if they've got somebody who's been assigned to them as a mentor.
Mhm.
That mentor at some point is going to realize, well, that person's just using a bunch of AI to interface with me. So I'm just going to use AI. Right. And so what that's going to wind up doing is people who are now managing and are being given responsibilities within a company, they're going to have to understand how these different AIs will interface with them to help them do their job. But it also eliminates a lot of the task level work that these interns and other folks did. So
Yeah.
now that person is responsible for having to understand at a higher level how their business works, how processes should be managed, what that looks like. And so the requirements of these managers and people that are going to be moving into business, this is this guy's opinion, which I kind of like, requires them to be smarter about the company, smarter about the business processes. So it doesn't actually eliminate jobs in a certain capacity. It just requires that those jobs have to be upskilled in a very different way, and the level of accountability for what those people do is going to look much different today than it does in 3 years. That was an interesting opinion. I don't know if you have a thought about that, but I look at what you guys are doing with Strety and I look at what I'm doing on the education side. I feel like there's a movement towards smarter, more accountable people in the business
Yeah.
space. And that's not going to go away. I think that's going to become exacerbated over the next 5 years where people are like, oh, everybody's going to lose their jobs. I don't know that that's true. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be this weird pivot back to face, human to human contact, being at live events, being out there, imagine, if you're documenting things really well and there's this bot that's taking care of all the level one tickets for you, like you can get into more complex things, right? You can make into, computer transformation, into coaching them on AI. There's just more interesting things you could do. So yeah, I agree with that. It's just like what are the higher level things we can do, and especially in person, right? I think that's where it's been most helpful. Of like, hey, the more we can have people on meetings and not necessarily like filling out RFPs or filling out, we get asked for like security questionnaires all the time, right? We had one of our engineers, a high level engineer, 6-figure salary plus, filling out a 90 question security questionnaire, right? And it was taking 2.5 hours. That gets done in 30 seconds. Now, did we let the engineer go? No, like the engineer's now building features inside of Strety. So like that's what's more important. And, you know, if they need a security call, then yeah, the engineer gets on the call and discusses like the vision for security, where we're going, all that stuff. Like that's the high value stuff. So I feel like there'll be more of those and less of like security questionnaires and things like that.
I agree. I do think that it's really interesting in the SaaS space, though, that you have the opportunity of being able to kind of test run your idea a little bit. I love the idea of being able to, because I think that's going to give, I agree with you. I don't think SaaS is going away. I think that you may wind up flooding the market with incomplete product too
Yeah.
fast, which kind of sucks. But I also think the opportunity to do test driving on whether you think you've got this idea. We don't have to have $100,000 to MVP your idea. Like you can
No.
vibe code it, see if you think it works, go take it to some friends, run it through its paces, and then go out and look for opportunity for investment or bootstrapping or whatever you want to do to get off the ground.
That stuff is super important. And I will say the software world is littered with shitty software. And what there hasn't been is that quick capitalist mechanism of cleaning up shitty software, right? People are like, it's built, it's a hassle to move my data, stuff like that. Like we hear it all the time. Hey, I don't want to move from X competitor because it's super hard to move. I mean, I will tell you, we move 500 employee companies, we move all their data, we take care of everything. It's super, but what do they have? They've got 20 years of muscle memory of like an ERP change they did 10 years ago, and it was a huge hassle. People jumped off bridges, like all this stuff, right? And they're like, I'm not doing that, right? And it's like, we're literally just moving your like meeting data from one place. Like, you're just going to a different website. Like that's the effort, right? Just log in through a different website. You'll see all your old meeting stuff, all that stuff. I think that's what's going to provide. It's going to level up all this, cloud software of like, you can't provide shitty software because there's going to be a better one, and they can move your data off very quickly because you've got these AI or agents pulling your data and migrating it very easily. But that's good. That's a good thing. That's a good thing for capitalism. You know, I still remember our HOA at our apartment in Miami was on like a $8,000 a year like contract, just monitoring like the HOA bills and who paid and didn't pay. And I remember like I was in BrightGauge, I was like, you guys pay 8,000 a year for this? Like it was like a simple, could have been done on an Excel sheet, but they cornered the market in the HOA business. People on the HOA board are typically sometimes kind of unpaid, so they don't care. Like just get the same HOA software everybody has. So these people have like regulatory capture of like they're going to get every HOA board because it's no competitors. Those were the ones that would die, right? And they'd be like, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah. And to your point, we see it in our space too, is, legacy vendors and stuff like that. If people aren't moving towards more flexible software solutions for the market, bloated PSAs or, expensive all-in-one tools for XDR, whatever those things are. I'm not poking at anybody or naming names, but there's software out there that's been around for far too long. And there are other softwares out there that are more flexible, that have APIs that allow you to get better bang for your buck. And I think the market at some point, I feel really strongly that the MSP space is at an inflection point right now.
Yeah.
I can't explain it. It's my spider sense. I've been in it for 20 something years, but there's an old guard bunch of people that are starting to age out and retire this year that came in that big wave, right? The late 90s, early 2000s, where all that stuff was new and exciting. And we were becoming MSPs and moving away from, hourly rates and all that stuff. And now I think there's this new group of people that are coming in their late 30s, early 40s. They're new. They've got different ideas. And I feel like there's a change coming, and especially with the AI and the ability to quickly iterate on SaaS delivery, watch out. I think the MSP space is about to get poked a little bit in a good way. Not like I think the complacency of the past is over. And I also believe that the fiefdoms that have been created by the giant MSP providing companies, people are kind of over it. I think people are looking for other avenues to explore without being told you will use this ecosystem of products. I think there's something to it. I really
Oh,
do.
100%. I think, and here's my hot take. I know one of the things, Andrew, you said like, hey, don't shop something that isn't out there, but this has been in my mind for a bit.
Go for it.
If I had to guess, I bet you there's going to be a big movement to on-premise soon. I think
Really?
that there is. I think because things have gotten so much better and quicker, we're what, a gig of speed. So if you needed to update software on a server, you could probably update it. I bet you were going to move to this, like people will have these like home servers and run their LLMs there, or run some apps and stuff like that. I know for a fact, like Basecamp, for example, like they're a big firm. Um, we actually use the coding language that the CTO of Basecamp created called Ruby on Rails. So they just moved off of Amazon. They're saving $5 million a year from their Amazon bill, and they just moved on premise. Right now, they're paying someone to host it, so it's like in a server environment, but it's their servers, right? So it's like they pay for the physical boxes. And so I think that that's something that's interesting, and that's really timely for the MSP industry, right? If that is a movement that starts picking pace, because these people are definitely cutting edge people, but like at some point, someone's going to say, "Hey, like your business has like these five, these 25 different SaaS things. Why don't you just use this like securitized open source model inside of your server and run it all there, and I'll handle it for you?" Like that could be a really interesting MSP uh, thing to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes back to, if you look at what the broader technology market is doing, MSP is always, 5 years of little, because we're mostly focused on the SMB space. So it's really like, we're not going to do stuff unless it makes sense for us to sell it.
Yeah.
So, but you look at that and, everybody, 10 years ago, I remember talking to a data center person and I was like, why are you still doing this? Like, this seems like a really bad idea. Like, you should probably think about doing something else. Like, I was completely ignorant as to what was coming.
Yeah.
And so, now you've got, people trying to look for the least most expensive power to push to these data centers, high redundancy, opportunity where they're being subsidized by the government. So you can come in at a much lower cost point. Other than the fact that, RAM is $20,000 a stick because
Yeah.
because of AI. I mean, running your own compute doesn't seem like a terrible way
Yeah.
to start trying to cut back. Because I know plenty of my clients are like, I'm spending how much a month on servers?
Yeah.
It just keeps ticking up, and they don't really look at it. One day they complain about the bill, and
Yeah.
you're an MSP, and you're like, yeah, you're spending $4,000 a month on 2 servers in Azure, and they're like, What are we doing? Like,
Yeah.
why is that a thing?" You're like, "'Cause you wanted redundancy. You just keep adding space to it."
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's crazy. So, well, I wanted to let you know that I really appreciate you coming on the show today and talking about what you guys do and how you see accountability in the MSP space and what you're seeing in the channel. And so it's just been an honor to get a chance to talk with you and to pick your brain on some of this stuff. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Um,
No, thanks for having me. Blast.
yeah,
We'll definitely, hopefully see each other in Vivo sometime soon at an
very.
MSP, or yeah, all the Evolve, IT Nation, Kaseya events or something like that. So
I'm sure we will run into each other. It is the biggest small world on the planet. The channel is, and so we always get to see each other, which is great.
yeah.
Before we check out, I'm gonna ask you 5 questions. We're gonna make this quick because I know you've got things that you need to get done. So we will start with, what is the best book that you ever read that helped you in business?
There's a book called the Hard Thing About Hard Things. It was about starting a technology business, and I think in the 2012, 2013. Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz, and that was a really good, phenomenal book of just like how hard it is to run a business, and all the problems that come across your people, process, all that stuff. So that's probably my favorite business book.
All right. And for those listening, I will put those in show notes so you will have a chance to go look them up and grab it from the internet. All right. Again, you don't have to say it if you don't want to. What's your favorite curse word? What do you like to, what's
Oh,
your soup dish?
I have a couple, right? So I'm Colombian, so there's some couple ones in there, but I'm gonna leave those out for now. I would, bullshit's a good one. It's
That's a
got
good
a
one.
it's good. It's got a good, you stub your toe, stub your toe, but you can say bullshit, and you call someone bluff or a lie, bullshit. So I'm a big fan of that one.
Love that. That's a good one. That's a new one that has not been said yet.
Yeah.
So you're in
Yeah.
your own space there. That's awesome. Okay, so if you have a band or a musical artist that you dig, you're on a desert island and that's the only catalog that you get is that person's music. Who are you going to? What is your go-to band or artist?
So many, I'm a born in 80. I'm a graduated high school in 99. I mean, just the that like 95 to 2000, just the most incredible, all genres, rap, rock, grunge. Like, you have Metallica, Nirvana. It's so hard to pick one. But if I was picking two or three, I would go Pat Green on the countryside. I'd go Tribe Called Quest kind of on the hip hop R&B side.
Nice.
And I'd go Smashing Pumpkins. I mean, I was just listening to Siamese Dream. And I was like, man, that's such a good album, just listening in front to back. So I would pick those three. Though I mean, I love Pearl Jam and Nirvana, a bunch of different bands, but those would be the top three.
That's fantastic. I love that you went Pat Green because that is like Texas country, 100%.
Yeah.
Dig that. That's not one that I've heard yet. Tribe Called Quest is great. I am I am strangely not a Pumpkins guy. Like, I am Pearl Jam, I am Nirvana, Soundgarden, I'm all things Alice in Chains, but I just can't, like, there's something about his voice that I just
He disappeared on me a little bit, but he's been in like a ton of podcasts recently because apparently like he's secretly some comedians like
he's Bill Burr's,
brother.
like,
Bill
brother, like,
brother's
half brother.
brother, yeah, like, they figured out, like, in the middle of the podcast, they're like, "We're related," like, "This is
Yeah,
my dad." He's like, "That's my dad." It's like, "Oh god." So, I don't know, man, so that revived that, and I was listening to the album, I
yeah.
was like, "Ah, this is such a great album."
I respect the music. Like, I do, like, listen, I respect Rush. I respect Styx. I respect Smashing Pumpkins. Do I like their lead singers? No. Like, I'm
Okay, yeah, I get it,
like,
I get it,
I get
I
it.
get it.
I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
But I dig where you're coming from. So those are great. Okay. We're sales call, client meeting, business meeting, HR meeting. You don't have to name names. What is one where you walked in and it was just a fucking train wreck? Like, you
Oh,
just were like,
what's
oh my
yeah.
God, this was
Oh
terrible.
my god. It was not that long ago either. It was just one of these busy days where it's like, I don't know, 5 demos on the book, right? And I couldn't find notes on this person. And so I walked into this demo and I was like, hey, thanks for giving us a look. How did you hear about us? How can I help you? All this stuff. And it was some person who I had been outbounding and like connected via cold email, but they responded to me through like LinkedIn or something like that. So I didn't remember that. And so he started this like, hey, this person's outbounding me, like prove something to me. But then he's like questioning me about like, what are my intentions for Strety? That he's like, I don't know. You're the one that reached out to me. I was like, I reached out to you. Like, I couldn't remember. I'm like looking through notes. I can't find anything in the CRM. Like, Jesus, what am I doing? Anyways, it went off to a rough start. And the guy just in the middle of it was like, this is such a waste of my time. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, it's too late. It's too late. Like, well, we're good.
I love that y'all were both like, yeah, this is not going to work. We should
Yeah,
just
yeah.
this
I
call."
was, yeah. I was like, yeah, sorry about that.
Oh my God, that's amazing. It just reminds me of like when I would interview folks. If you'll ever hear me interview somebody, if you're in an interview with me, when I say, do you have any questions for me? That means the interview is over. And sometimes that would happen. Like I would be on a joint interview with somebody in our company and I would be talking and we would get 5 minutes in and I would interrupt whoever was on my team. I was like, yeah, that's great. Yeah. Do you have any questions for us? And that was everybody's
Yeah,
cue for like, this meeting is over.
we're good.
We're not going to talk anymore. So
Yeah.
that's funny. Okay. Well, last question. If there's somebody that you would recommend that you could put me in touch with, or somebody that we might know mutually that you're like, hey, have you thought about having this person on? Who's somebody that you think I should have on the podcast that would be worth having a conversation with?
I had these two like upstart young UVA like computer science kids just reach out blindly and were like, hey, we need some advice. We're trying to get into the thing. And they're like anti-phishing email, some sort of AI thing. I really liked them. Like they were super sharp kids. They'd known each other since they were like, I don't know, 10 years old. Like they've got the entrepreneurial gene, but they're both computer science guys from UVA is a good school. And so they're trying to break into the market. I think it'd be an interesting conversation just on them of like, hey, what made you go to the MSP market? Where did you get this idea? What's on the horizon on phishing and stuff like that? So that could be interesting. Cambrient AI, CAMBRIENT.ai. Hopefully they get some traction.
For sure. I will definitely reach out to them once you set me up, and we'll see if we can't do something to pick their brain and figure out why because it'd be interesting to find out from a completely third party. Cause I think, we all kind of grew up, but we all wound up in this space at some point and we're here now after 20 something years. It'd be great to see where somebody fresh out of college is like there. Like I want to go figure out how to get into that space. Like
super interesting.
I feel like most people who got into this space kind of stumbled into it for the most part. Now people are choosing to get into it, and I'd be interested to know why too. Well, again, Larry, thank you for being on the pod. I really cannot tell you enough what it means to me that you took time out of your day to hang out and chat with me and allow me to pick your brain on this stuff. So, thank you again. And I look forward to seeing you soon at some event.
Yeah.
We've got to get together and share a beverage and catch up.
For sure. Andrew, always a pleasure. Good to see you.
Thank you.